Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Patron Week is wrapping up and we're continuing our exploration of the World Legacy lore. Last time we checked in, Avram had gathered the many tribes across the world, uniting them under the banner of Crusadia. But what were they trying to accomplish? Well, our good little hero wasn't the only one that had an adventure after the defeat of Lee and the death of Ebe, as her brother, LONGIRSU, despondent and broken over her loss, would not rest until he had her back. See, while Avram was given partial access to the World Legacy and Blue Sky's core, LONGIRSU gathered the remaining Mekk-Knight cores from the defeated Nightmares, and with the knowledge gleaned from them, began the construction of a dread machine that would bring Ib back to the world of the living. But it wouldn't be enough to simply have her back. The world had proven to be a dangerous, callous place, and the only way she would be safe is if he molded the world, crafted it, so that there would be nothing to threaten them. And so, premiering in the August 2018 core set Soul Fusion, Orcust would become one of the most powerful decks in the format, maybe even of all time, sporting a resilient resource engine, robust boss monsters, and a flexibility that was difficult to keep up with, eventually forming the second pillar of the infamous TOS format. But what makes these mechanical marvels so great? Well, that's what I'm here to share with you. We'll strike up the band to check out the orchestra, see how the top brass functions, then find some tracks to accompany our arrangements. It's time to aim for the heavens with Orcust. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So what's the deal with Orcust? Well, they're a series of dark attribute machine type monsters. They're characterized by two facets. A majority of our main deck monsters banish themselves for some kind of effect, generally to summon an Orcust from a variety of different zones, while our link monsters shuffle banished machines back into our deck to provide a number of utility effects, with an emphasis on monsters that are linked. As a reminder, a monster is linked if it points to a monster with its link arrows, or is being pointed to by a monster's link arrows. And while not as strict as co-linking, it is interesting that this follow-up evil archetype has a similar mechanic to Nightmares. I love little lore nods like that. But before we get into those, let's cover the foundational members of the theme, the main deck monsters, and we can actually cover the first three fairly quickly, as they're quite similar. Orcust Brass Bombard is a level 1 tuner monster with 500 attack and 1900 defense. Orcust Symbol Skeleton is a level 3 monster with 1200 attack and 1500 defense. And Orcust Harp Horror is a level 4 monster with 1700 attack and 1400 defense. Each one of them can be banished from the grave to summon an Orcust from a particular zone. Brass Bombard summons from the hand, Symbol Skeleton is a targeted graveyard revival, and Harp Horror summons right out of the deck. But no matter what, it locks you out of special summoning monsters for the rest of the turn except dark monsters, which, if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh! For any extensive period of time, will sound like the flimsiest slap on the wrist restriction ever made, because as it turns out, dark monsters have historically been pretty good. These three form the core of your deck, with Harp Horror able to pull other Orcusts right out of your deck as needed, letting you link them away for your big bosses, at which point you can use cards like Symbol Skeleton to revive those bosses, and Brass Bombard just kinda hangs out. It wasn't actually largely used. Despite the fact that, like Shadal's, the random tuner gives the deck access to synchros, but whatever. Unfortunately, the deck is a few strings short of an instrument, since Harp Horror is currently banned on the TCG Forbidden and Limited list, taking out a lot of the deck's power. The good news is that this is at 3 in every other format I can think of, including recently in Master Duel. So if you don't mind your cards being made of 1s and 0s, you can slot this bad boy back where it belongs so the band can play on. GoldenGirsu, the Orcust Mekk-Knight, is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can send an Orcust or World Legacy card from your deck to the grave. Then, if 2 or more other cards are in this card's column, treat this card as a tuner this turn. If you control no other monsters, you can special summon a World Legacy token to both players' fields and defense position, which is a level 1 Dark Machine monster with 0 attack and defense. A bit of a latecomer to the theme, Orcust Girsu partially fills the role that Harp Horror left behind by foolishing any on-theme monster right into the grave. The tuner effect condition comes in from the Mekk-Knight half of the card, though in most regards you won't be using this in an Orcust deck. As we've seen before, people weren't exactly slotting in synchros just to facilitate Brass Bombard. But the token summoning effect really pushes Girsu over the top by giving you access to your Link 2 pool all by itself, while locking out a number of cards that require your opponent to have an open board. Think your Imperms, think your Fenrirs, all that stuff. And with the repeatability of Orcust, it's only a matter of time before you can do this again and again to make an even more stacked graveyard. The TCG might be a bit aimless without our Gilded Gargoyle, but now we have a new monster that makes up the main thrust of our strategy. Orcust Nightmare is a level 7 monster with 100 attack and 2000 defense, and can't be destroyed by battle with a Link monster. You can banish this card from your grave, then target a monster on the field. The Dark Summon lock is applied like our core Orcusts, and you also send a Dark Machine monster from your deck to the grave, except a copy of itself, and if you do, the targeted monster gains attack equal to the level of the monster sent times 100 until the end of the turn. So we covered this card back in Nightmare Explained, and we kind of glazed over it because it doesn't really do anything for them. And that's because its status as a nightmare monster was really more of a bonus effect tacked onto this monster, rather than being a fully fledged member of that team. In Orcust, it was pivotal, with deck builders brewing and scheming until they could find the fastest way to throw 2 monsters onto the board, make a Link 2 Nightmare, link it into Mermaid, then summon this out of the deck, giving you access to the Orcust Link 2, and you are off to the races from there. But it doesn't just end there, because while in the grave, not only is it another Foolish Burial for our Orcusts, it's a Foolish Burial for any Dark Machine, and we've got some really choice targets. And the bigger the monster, the bigger the bonus, not only giving your own monsters a boost, but could potentially boost an opponent's monster if messing with their stats will help you in some way. Or even if you don't have any targets on your side of the field, if you're that desperate for the Foolish. But this hasn't made the messed up fractal splintering any easier to digest though. I swear you could put this next to an SCP and it wouldn't feel out of place. World Legacy World Wand is a level 8 monster with 500 attack and 2500 defense, and this normal summoned or set card can't be destroyed by battle with a monster special summoned from the extra deck. If this card is sent to the grave, you can special summon a World Legacy monster from your hand, and you can banish this card from your grave, then target a banished Orcust monster and special summon it, putting you under the Dark Summoning lock. See? We got that Orcust connection somewhere. This is an especially outstanding card because it adds another link to the resource chain of the deck. While we can recover banished Orcusts no problem, summoning them back to the field directly means that they're ready for action that much sooner. And if, for some reason, you're playing other World Legacies, its effect when sent to the grave gets them out of your hand. And all of that wrapped up in an ancient techno artifact orbiting the Earth. Now that's a card that's out of this world. Alright, that does it for the main deck monsters. Now it's time for the extra deck ones, starting with our links. Galatea, the Orcust Automaton, is a Link 2 monster with 1800 attack, requiring any 2 effect monsters, including an Orcust monster. This linked card can't be destroyed by battle, and you can target one of your banished machine monsters and shuffle it into the deck. Then you can set an Orcust spell or trap directly from your deck. That's right, you get one of your monsters back into rotation while getting a fantastic piece of support ready to go, all on a decently sized monster that, with careful zone placement, can't even be destroyed by battle. And since you're more than likely going to banish at least one Orcust to make this, you'll have fuel all ready to go right from the start. You'll also notice that getting the spell or trap card isn't mandatory. If you want, you can just shuffle a banished machine into your deck and do nothing else with it if you've run out of targets. Now, say what you will about what LONGIRSU has done here. Me, I'm not one to judge, but there is something about the design that has me completely baffled. Why, in the wide world of sports, with all of LONGIRSU's technological know-how, did he give Galatea the Fire Emblem Awakening feat? You've got this machine swinging around a giant scythe while they have peg legs! You need to fix that. LONGIRSU, the Orcust Orchestrator, is a Link 3 monster with 2500 attack, requiring 2 or more effect monsters, including an Orcust monster, as material. This linked card can't be destroyed by card effects, and it can target 2 of your banished machine monsters and shuffle them into the deck. Then you can send a linked monster your opponent controls to the grave. But this card can't attack the turn you activate this effect. While Galatea sets up your game plan, LONGIRSU is here to mess up your opponents, with one of the most effective methods of removal so far: non-targeted sending. While linking might seem that it implies targeting, it really just lets you send a monster that meets that criteria. It doesn't even have to be linked to LONGIRSU, so if your opponent has independently linked their own monsters, they are not safe. And with this monster on the field, they won't be there for long. Girsu. Orcustrian is a Link 4 monster with 3000 attack, requiring 2 or more effect monsters including an Orcust monster as material. This linked card can't be destroyed by battle or card effect, and it can target 3 of your banished machine monsters, shuffle them into the deck, and if you do, the attack and defense of any linked monster your opponent currently controls becomes 0, also their effects are negated. And that's permanent, by the way. Any affected monster is basically just fodder at that point. It's an impressive finisher, but not necessarily an effective one. While you get to recycle a lot of monsters with this, your banished pool is almost as much of a resource in and of itself, giving you fuel for the effects of Galatea and LONGIRSU, so you might not always have enough to spare. So, despite some impressive pipes, I am gonna have to file a noise complaint. DOOTS, the Orcust of the Evening Star, is a rank 8 Xyz monster with 2600 attack and 2100 defense, requiring any 2 level 8 monsters as material, and you can only special summon copies of DOOTS once per turn. And you can also Xyz summon this card by using any Orcust Link monster you control as material. If any number of cards you control would be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can attach a material instead to save all of those cards. And if this card is special summoned, you can activate one of these effects. Either send a card your opponent controls to the grave, or attach one of your banished machine monsters to this card as material. Now this is a sleeper hit, and really helped Orcust come into its own. By converting any of your resource engines into this, you get your choice of non-targeting sending removal, or adding another shield to it, keeping itself and your cards safe, whether you were deflecting opponents' interactions or cheesing instant fusion to keep Winda on board. And because it triggers on special summon, not Xyz summon, you can bring this back with Symbol Skeleton or World Wand and get the effect again. This is a fantastic card, both in Orcust and as part of any rank 8 toolbox, and is easily the evening star of the show. Alright, that's all of our monsters covered, now it's time for the spells and traps. Orchestrated Return is a normal spell card that sends an Orcust or World Legacy monster from your hand or face-up field to the grave to draw 2 cards. Here it is, folks, our archetypal draw 2 spell, and this one is an outstanding example. While not all of the World Legacy monsters are quite as helpful in the grave, our Orcusts love being there. So with this, we've effectively cycled through 2 cards and set up a 3rd, all without having to commit any other resources. There really isn't much else to say about this mechanically. A 10 out of 10 card would totally take another dip in the Bacta tank. Orchestrated Einsatz is a continuous spell card, and if your opponent normal or special summons any number of monsters, except during the damage step, you can take an Orcust or World Legacy monster from your hand or deck and either send it to the grave or banish it. Now the banishing part might seem strange because our effects activate in the grave to then banish them, but remember, we've got to get fuel for our links somehow. So if you've already made use of a particular Orcust's effect, you can instead just banish it straight away, so LONGIRSU has all the parts they need to show a monster a bad time. Or, alternatively, you can just load up your grave with another useful Orcust and or World Legacy. That's totally valid. Really, the big issue here is you're gonna have to check to see if you have renter's insurance, and if so, if it covers cosmic light beams lifting your ocean-based orbital elevator out of the sea. They can be pretty stingy about stuff like that, believe me. In fact, let's turn back the clock a bit and take a look at this before it got turned into the world's most avant-garde Christmas tree. Orchestrated Babel is a field spell card that allows you to activate the effects of Orcust monsters in the grave, or link monsters you control with Orcust in their original names, as quick effects. And during your main phase, if this card is in your grave except the turn it was sent to the grave, you can send a card from your hand to the grave to add this card to your hand. That's right, we have a spell speed modifier on our hands, and I'm not gonna lie, it was so hard keeping this under my hat until we got here. This is probably the coolest card in the entire theme, and honestly it barely does anything, but what it does do is amazing. Remember all the stuff we talked about in the monster section? Imagine if that was a quick effect, then you might be able to see why this is so bonkers. With this live, Galatea is setting you an Orcust speller trap every turn, even your opponent's. LONGIRSU is non-targeting, sending monsters to grave during your opponent's turn as well. Symbol Skeleton can summon DOOTS at quick effect speed to snipe a card. Orchestrated Nightmare can be banished from the grave to get a quick attack boost at a moment's notice, and I'm sure there's so many other things I haven't even thought of. And unless you're packing a Cosmic Cyclone, this card's gonna come back turn after turn to keep this up, even acting as a kind of discard outlet to enable any grave effects. You know, like from Orcusts. While there are other effects that work like this, I don't feel like any of them have been quite so catastrophically powerful as this example. No wonder God wanted this thing taken down. Quick, how do we get all the Orcust players to all understand different card games so they can't communicate with each other? Orchestrated Attack is a normal trap card that can be activated when an attack is declared by a monster. Tribute an Orcust or World Legacy monster, then target a monster your opponent controls and banish it. Since the trigger is on any attack, it doesn't actually have to be from your opponent, nor does it have to be the monster involved in the battle. And because you can set this with Galatea during your opponent's turn, it's actually more proactive than you might think. It won't bypass targeting protection like our other pieces of removal, but banishing can shut off an entirely different vector of gameplay. And it's certainly showing its effectiveness. Look, LONGIRSU even has the high ground. Nothing bad ever happens when you have the high ground. Orchestrated Release is a normal trap card that tributes 2 machine monsters, then targets a monster in your grave and special summons it. And if your opponent controls a link monster, you can target 2 instead. This is a pretty underwhelming card, not gonna lie. It's a 3-for-1 that becomes a 3-for-2 if your opponent has a link monster, which with the advent of Master Rule Revision 4 isn't as guaranteed as it once was. Granted, it gets you back any monster, but at that point just play Back to the Front. Play Call of the Haunted, play literally anything else. It might put Orcust in your grave, it might put machines in general into your grave, but we have better ways to fast track those cards into the grave, LONGIRSU. That's not him in there! Lee's coming back! LONGIRSU! Don't hand over the body, LONGIRSU! Orcust Crescendo is a counter trap card, and when a spell card, trap card, or monster effect is activated while you control an Orcust Link monster, negate the activation, and if you do, banish that card. And you can banish this card from your grave to add to your hand one of your Dark Machine monsters that are either banished or are in your deck, but you're locked not just into special summoning Darks, but Dark Machines for the whole turn, including before this effect was activated. And these 2 effects are mutually exclusive, so you can't activate this to negate a card, then immediately get a search. This card is phenomenal. It's hard to codify just how good it really is. It's searchable by Galatea, who just by being on the field makes this card live, and nabs you a free Orcust on a turn you don't expect to be activating another copy of this. Or, as the card says, any Dark Machine if you've got any funny ones splashed in. And it banishes what it negates too, so whatever you're getting rid of, it ain't coming back. Just goes to show that no matter what period of time it is, Sophia will always get bodied by a little gremlin that's a fraction of their size. See, it's like poetry. It rhymes. Orchestrated Core is a continuous trap card, and once per turn, you can banish a monster from your field or grave, then target an Orcust or World Legacy card you control, except this card. Neither player can target it with card effects this turn, even if this card leaves the field. And if any number of other Orcust and or World Legacy cards you control would be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can send this card to the grave instead. So the cost can be paid by banishing any monster, and it keeps any on-theme cards safe from targeting for the rest of the turn, which is nice. Unless the kind of interaction you're trying to protect against is chainable. Now, if that interaction is destruction, Core can be sent to the grave to cover for that too, but everything else? You're out of luck. It really just does too little to be considered for serious play. And honestly, I think that's for the better. I don't know if I would have liked to see the moment before Galatea got turned into a pancake by World Wand, hitting the planet's surface at terminal velocity. That would not be pretty. So that's all the Orcust cards, but what do we do with them? Well, with all the value cards we have access to, our main game plan is to establish a loop as soon as possible, and make sure it stays that way. Our main engine has plenty of disruption and negation, so we'll be looking to leverage the larger link pool for offensive plays, as well as other cards that can turbo our deck into our grave. So what can we play to help them out? Let's talk about some graveyard fillers. Foolish Burial is our obvious go-to choice to yard whichever Orcust we need. While Harpour isn't around to help in the TCG, you can circumvent this by sending Nightmare, banishing it to boost anything, sending World Wand to grave, then banishing it to get Nightmare on board. We sadly can't go into Mermaid to get a second Nightmare and go into Galatea, but any normal summonable effect monster gets us there. Foolish Burial Goods is also good for setting up Babel. While you could use Terraforming, that just puts it into your hand. Goods it into your graveyard, and that's a discard outlet. Eventually. And if the TCG ever goes the way of Master Duel and just bans Terraforming, this is a good one to keep in mind. As usual, let's take a look at the World Legacy listing of cards to see if there's any Orcust support hiding in there, like with the previous archetypes in this story. Something you'll notice about all of the World Legacy monsters is that they are also dark machines, meaning that they fit in with a lot of our support. However, from that point, the connections start to go cold. World Crown can be used like in Crusadia to help with link climbing, and can still provide its summon negation. World Armor can be summoned out of your hand with the effect of World Wand to nab you not just a giant monster, but also a World Legacy card. World Lance remains as a very powerful hand trap for our link monsters, but probably the one that works closest with us is World Arc. If our links ever manage to get destroyed, we can bring them back with Arc's in-hand effect, and if we're able to stick this onto the board with a normal summon, this does become a Foolish Burial anytime our opponent special summons from the extra deck. Lib, the World Key Blade Master, remains as one of the best extenders we could hope for. By using GoldenNovaYugioh, we can send a World Legacy monster to the grave, make a token, and then link into Lib, at which point we can access World Legacy Succession as a revival tool, before continuing up the link ladder to spin another card. Speaking of World Legacy spells and traps, there aren't very many that actually support Orcust. This is one of the first themes where their support is actually in their own archetype. Many of them run the gamut between not even being close to usable to being incidentally useful, with World Legacy's Memory probably being one of the closest. However, it only summons GoldenNovaYugioh, and you're going to want to make sure you only use it during the end of a turn so it doesn't get in the way of your special summons. The cool news though is that because it puts GoldenNovaYugioh back in your hand, you can essentially double dip on the Foolish Burial effect. Since Nightmare and Crescendo both work with dark machines in general, what are some good ones we can splash in? If there's a light matchup we want to extremely hose, use Crescendo to get Ally of Justice Quarantine. And you can do something similar with archetypes that send cards from the deck to the grave with Dimension Fortress Weapon. Gizmek Orochi is a popular option, as it's a free big monster you can summon from the grave, provides a huge boost off of being sent to the grave with Nightmare, can provide removal itself, and in rare circumstances, can even help you make LONGIRSU the normal way. Jinzo can make an appearance to help deal with Labyrinth decks, Gen X ally Birdman just recently got Unlimited, opening up a whole host of options, and BM4 Blast Spider doesn't have a lot of synergy with us, since our removal sends to the grave and not destroys, but if we run over other things in battle, that burn damage will still trigger. Shame that Heavy Metal Raiders is a field spell and conflicts with Babel, otherwise that would be pretty funky. Another great way to vent some machines into our grave is with Scrap Recycler. While we're not going to be using the second effect for much, setting up our entire theme off a single normal summon seems pretty good. You can even play more than 3 copies of it if you go down the Scrap Raptor route, which can pop itself for an extra normal summon, which will in turn search you Scrap Raptor to use that normal summon on. And once you add things like Fossil Dig and Scrapyard into the mix, it just gets absurd. And at that point you can add in the Scrap Wyvern and Golem lines, and if I keep going down this route I'm gonna have to pay royalties to Havercardman for appropriating his Chop Shop list. As for dark monsters in general, a very convenient line of link monsters that all have that attribute are IP Masquerena, helpful for if you want to go into non-darks by waiting until your opponent's turn, Nightmare Unicorn, which IP can spring on your opponent and is one heck of a removal tool, and Access Code Talker because of course we have access to the code. While we may not have a diverse pool of link monsters to get multiple pops in a single turn, even just one can mean the difference between a game being over or not. One of the big issues while playing graveyard decks like this is that you're susceptible to banishing effects. And while Babel makes us all but immune to the overreaching Called by the Grave, getting hit by Dimension Shifter is a bit harder to deal with. You might be able to use your own Called by the Grave against it, but since it's a one-of, you can't really rely on it. So you may have to focus on being a bit trickier, and that's where Chaos Hunter comes in. From activated to continuous to applied effects, as long as it's your opponent's card that causes banishing, Chaos Hunter turns it off, keeping your grave secured. It also comes with that discard, which can actually help your plans in certain scenarios. The downside is that your opponent needs to perform a special summon to get this onto the board quickly, and against D-Shifter's strongest client Fluandereeze, that's basically a blank tech, so keep an eye on your meta to see how it'll do. Especially because turning off banishing can have a wealth of benefits against a number of decks. As for a silly tech pick, well, a deck that this might have a good home in is Ishizu Tier. Sure, most of the deck has been gutted, but when it comes to filling up the space the ban list left behind, you could do worse. Most Orcusts you tip over with Merly, Agido, and Kelbeck all get you value, and sending Orcusts with Sheeran ain't too bad either. And because you're going to be playing King of the Swamp to mimic Kitkalos, it can also be used to mimic Cyber Dragon for Chimera Tech Overdragon, using any Orcust left in your grave as material, giving you a surprise finisher. Or, if you don't want to play tier limits in your deck and would rather just play original Cyber Dragon, then you could make use of the newly revealed Over Future Fusion. Both effects can be activated in the same turn, so you can send a Cyber Dragon right to the grave, then use all of your Dark Machines in grave to make Chimera Tech Over Dragon. Just make sure you only use this as a finisher, since not even the protection of the Gearsus can stop your cards from being sent to the grave. And that's all I have to say about Orcust. Sadly, they won't see a resurgence in paper until Harp Horror comes back. But with Konami's penchant for removing some silly cards from the list as of late, I don't think we're far off from seeing Orcust back at full operating capacity. So make sure to keep your instruments tuned and your skills sharp, because you never know when it's going to be time to strike up the band and strike down your opponent. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Would Orcust coming back be music to your ears, or would that be a bit too much of a sour note? And which one is your favorite? I've got to say, LONGIRSU is certainly on my cosplay bucket list. That spear looks ridiculous. Let me know down in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. When you want to protect your cards with the power of dragon scales, get some sweet lore for them, and support the channel, check out my link in the description to get started. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, A Random Pup, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Danny Bound, Divine Dragon Felgrand 4123, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iskander 711, John, Jordan, Julius Sneezer, Mana Charge, Marluxia's a Girl, Nathan Vig, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Sir Knight JCB, Skybuster Leo, Sophie, apparently, the Fresh Prince of Con Air, the Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Almento 5010, Ariel Kersey, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Beluga Masta, Blue Gem, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Drachenwald, Emony, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, In the House Like Carpet, Inblink, Gesture Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh, Lord Whoop-de-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Mega Combi, Michael Shimabukuro, Nadia McCarthy, Nitromo, Ruxith Sarani, Shizuki Nijimura, Star-Lord 777, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, Tucker Ordorn, and Zaldreka, as well as the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to be a part of these credits, get my videos early, join in on the monthly custom card review stream, and, of course, support the channel, please consider checking out the link to my Patreon in the description or becoming a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see another video covering the World Legacy storyline, check out the beginning right here with World Chalice. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.